Hello, everybody. Welcome to Bitcoin Not Crypto. You can find me on Twitter X at Force Total. And today we have a guest on, Brian DeMint. Do you want to just tell the viewers, the listeners, a little bit about what got you into Bitcoin?
Yeah, the first time I ignored Bitcoin is always where I like to start, because we all have the first time we ignored Bitcoin story. I remember seeing it on ESPN College Game Day, the college football. They had right before the game, they had the announcers lining up on the sidelines, and this was probably 2012. I think that was the first time I'd heard about Bitcoin, and again dismissed it. But the announcers before the game, they have their microphones. They're like, yeah, what's Smith going to do? What's Johnson going to do? And in the background, there was a kid that had a sign. I say a kid, a college student. He had a sign that said, hey, mom, send Bitcoin. And then it had a QR code on it. And I just, whatever, kind of passively thought about it. And then later that week, maybe it was a week or two later, I Googled it. I was like, you know what happened? What was that Bitcoin thing? And sure enough, the Reddit forums and the Bitcoin Talk forums were blowing up because they were like, we made it to ESPN. It wasn't like ESPN was talking about Bitcoin. It had nothing to do with the ESPN broadcast, but that was like one of the biggest things in Bitcoin happening was them, was a Bitcoiner being in the background. And it turned out that this kid had something like, at that time in 2012, Bitcoin had something like $25,000 worth of Bitcoin sent to him from other Bitcoiners who just like paused it, scanned the QR code, and then sent this guy 24,000. So I hope that kid, went out, celebrated a little bit, but kept most of it, because he'd probably be he'd be a 100 millionaire today if he did that. But I remember thinking that only reinforced the idea that Bitcoin's stupid. It's for college frat boys, and okay, it's like dumb internet money, and we all have that. And just as a food for thought, we all have those types of reservations, and hopefully we have those types of reservations the first time we hear about Bitcoin. So when we hear Bitcoiners, or excuse me, no coiners today saying those same things, when one of my friends tells me Bitcoin's a Ponzi scheme or it's Tulip Mania, and they're real proud of themselves for saying some cool thing like Tulip Mania, just understand that those are the Bitcoiners of tomorrow. Those people that have a skeptical mind, even if it's kind of like a mid-wit type of response of, oh, it's a Ponzi scheme, that's okay. They're being skeptical. We as Bitcoiners are inherently skeptical. So good, they didn't just jump right in. I think in line with the name of your show, Bitcoin Not Crypto, you see this with like kind of the crypto crowd. They're the ones that maybe don't ask that question. The first time their friend tells them about Trump coin or whatever it happens to be, they go right into it. So the person who is skeptical, understand that is probably the pleb of tomorrow that's going to help support this Bitcoin social layer and move progress forward. The first time that I heard about Bitcoin in a real way where it clicked for me was, I think I'd actually even maybe bought a little bit by this point just to kind of test it out and play with it. But where the light bulb moment went off was when Andreas Antonopoulos was on the Joe Rogan Experience for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And when he talked about digital scarcity, that was when it clicked for me. I'd heard that, 21 million, and I heard digital scarcity, but the way he referred to it was he was really referencing the way that digital things were always disrupting analog things. So, the point he made to Joe Rogan was everything's going digital. So anything that was once analog is going to have a digital version if it doesn't already. Look at what happened to music with Napster and LimeWire. When music went digital, it completely disrupted the monetary side of the music industry. And so music used to have all this value because the record companies could print the music on a disc or on a cassette or whatever it was. And as soon as it went digital, it lost value because it could just be copied and pasted endlessly. And so one of the last holdouts from the analog to digital revolution was money. Money could never go fully digital because there wasn't a way to cap it. If we had just this ability to copy and paste money, then it would be even worse than a central bank doing it. You would have infinite central banks. And we've kind of seen that in the crypto space. You have these, 20,000 central banks, and there's a problem with that. That's the profundity of Bitcoin. It was the first time in human history that we were able to take something digital and cap it. That innovation is massively understated when we talk about Bitcoin. Bitcoiners get it, but the no coin community doesn't get that. And when it finally sets in, I think that's when most of us go headlong into Bitcoin, because we like, this is a truly special innovation that everything is going to go digital in this world, and money, we found the perfect way to make money go digital. And that's when it clicked for me.
Yeah, I love that podcast episode. Actually, I didn't listen to it when it first came out, but kind of when I started going deeper into Bitcoin, I was like, okay, where's some more? I mean, Joe Rogan now is like obvious. It's almost like mainstream, right? Like I was like, where are some like more mainstream kind of discussions about this? So I went back and listened to that, and at the time, I mean, it was so early, talking about so many of the great aspects of Bitcoin. Really incredible. I wanted to go back to that first ESPN moment there. I wonder if you checked out the price, because that probably was like a huge event for Bitcoin. Right now, Bitcoin's mentioned every other day on CNBC, and sovereign wealth funds are buying it, or buying IBIT. And it's like, barely moves the needle now. But back then, that might have been a huge deal with the price. Do you remember looking at the price at the
I
time, or?
don't remember. I don't remember looking at the price. I just remember the scuttlebutt around Bitcoiners and them being so excited. So I imagine that it did move the price, and I'm sure we could probably check it if we wanted to. But yeah,
Right.
I'll probably do that when we get off air, just so I know for for future discussions. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that other, point you mentioned, sort of the analog to digital that we have, I think there's a lot of sound money proponents, that were obviously interested in gold, and, Bitcoin replicates gold in some of its aspects, right? The proof of work, right? There's a real cost of production of gold. Um, w do you think, there's kind of some people that are into gold kind of believe the idea of a tokenization on like a blockchain of gold. What would be some of maybe the problems with something like that compared to Bitcoin, where it's built in and it's part of it isn't tied to like an asset like gold. It just has the characteristics of
Mhm.
gold.
Oh, that's a fantastic question. It's funny because you get the Peter Schiffs of the world who, in a discussion with Robert Breedlove, he'll say that, well, that's what makes gold can be digital, because we can have a digital representation of gold. And it's funny because we Bitcoiners learned that the fiat maximalists, when they say this time it'll be different, the gold bugs were the one that taught us that. They taught us that like modern monetary theory always says that this time will be different. The gold bugs have been ahead of the curve. The problem is when we talk about a gold pegged stablecoin or a gold pegged digital representation, the gold bugs are now saying this time will be different. I will ask my gold bug father-in-law, or excuse me, stepfather. Um, I'll ask him, he says the same thing. He's a big gold bug. And he says, oh, we can do digital representations of gold. I said, please tell me how that is any different than a dollar backed gold. We've had that before, because they will be the first ones to say how ridiculous it is that the US came off the gold standard. So tell me how a digital version of that will be any different. You're still relying on the human trustworthiness of that peg, or how are you verifying in the vault? I was talking to my friend who's actually my business partner, who's also a sales rep for Oakley. They sell sunglasses. If you get if somebody is on the other side of the world, I guess Oakley's sold everywhere, so everybody knows what Oakley is. But he was talking about how all these stores nowadays have digital inventory, so they have these beautiful systems that can track their inventory. But he'll go into stores and he'll discover under a counter somewhere, they'll have like 100 extra pairs of sunglasses that they didn't even realize they had in inventory.
Hmm.
And they're sitting on like literally thousands of dollars of inventory that wasn't showing up on their digital ledger, because there was some human error in that process. So nobody was even trying to corruptedly take advantage of the system. It's just employees were checking things out that actually didn't get sold. And so this company actually didn't have a very good, reliable record of their inventory. So even though they had physical sunglasses and then they had a digital representation of the sunglass in the inventory, there was a wild discrepancy in reality. And so when that happens, you actually get into really major problems. You get all sorts of leakage that is unintentional, and that's without corruption. You add corruption into it, and you're going to get an entirely new layer of it, especially when you're talking about something as valuable as gold. So, like, to your point, Bitcoin is the thing. You always know you have a Bitcoin because the ledger itself is the representation. It's not the representation of it. It is the thing you're looking for. So it's like going back to our Oakley sunglasses, under the, in the inventory, it's not looking at the digital ledger of the inventory. You're actually counting the physical stock every time. And so you know exactly what you have. So when you're looking or auditing the Bitcoin blockchain, you're auditing the actual stock of it, not a representation of the stock. You're actually representing the stock, your inventory of the Bitcoins that you have. So there's not a connection. There's no two dots that are being connected by a common strand. It is the dot is the dot, and that's it. And so you're removing one layer of either corruption, one layer of fallibility, one layer of just bad systems in place. And so gold being tied to a digital representation, it returns all of those problems that humanity has ever done. And it does it in a way where back in the day when we had an analog connection to gold, there was like paper receipts for physical gold. That was actually probably a better way to do it. Digital representations of gold, it makes it easier to replicate those things because I don't even need to print the inventory. There's not even a physical process I need to do to update the physical ledger, or the paper ledger. That actually requires analog work. Now, in a digital representation, it's just a few keystrokes and it's done, or it can be updated automatically without anybody doing anything. So sorry, with getting into the minutia of that, it actually not only digital gold in the sense of digital representations of physical gold, it not only is as bad as a gold-backed dollar or a gold reserve currency, it's actually worse.
That's so interesting. Yeah. It makes me think that the paperization of gold, like gold certificates, from a bank or a smelter, and those becoming sort of what we used as dollars, that attempted to solve the portability and divisibility problems of gold. But that was like the first sort of like tokenization of that asset, right? It just wasn't digital because digital didn't really exist at the time. Um, and it's interesting because, yeah, trying to tokenize something and make something physical digital, it still needs to be enforced in the physical world.
Mm.
There's no direct connection, but it's almost like with Bitcoin, it's not physical, it's all digital, and so it gets enforced digitally by the nodes and the miners. It doesn't have to go back to the physical world at all to be enforced that it's real and true. That's kind of how I see it a little bit.
Yep. And the beautiful part about Bitcoin is it does have a tie to the physical world, but only in its creation, only in its minting. Once it has been minted, it's grounded in reality. It's grounded in the laws of physics. But once it is been grounded in the laws of physics that we needed work to create it or to mint it in the first place, it now exists as far as the record keeping of it entirely digitally. Record keeping digitally, purely digitally, is efficient. Creation of the asset or the thing in the first place being digital is the problem. So the creation needs to be physical. The record keeping can be highly efficient if it is purely digital.
So you're talking about the mining process using electricity, hardware to run hashes and to unlock more Bitcoin. Why does that need to be physical? I guess is a good question. Why? What is the importance of tying Bitcoin to the physical world in that way?
Yeah.
What do you think?
That's a great question too. Nico Moran from Simply Bitcoin has he says this pretty consistently, and I think it's a great quote. He goes, "No man should work for something that another man can print." And so it goes back to this idea that there's an inherent underlying quality about something that takes work to produce. If currency can be created through somebody's decree, then it has no basis in physical reality. If I have to, in order to get a claim check on new Bitcoin, I have to do something for the network. That is a fair and equitable system. In this case, by me providing hashes to the network, I'm increasing the overall hash rate of the network. So if I bring a billion hash, 100 billion hashes per second to the network, that means there's now more competition for the next Bitcoin block. And by creating more competition, I'm creating more security for the network. So I can only have a claim on new Bitcoin if I'm providing security to the network. It's like if I, if I wanted stock in a company, well, I can either invest money in the company, or in any new entrepreneur knows that just investing some money into the company is not the way to do it. You actually have to provide sweat equity. Me and my partners in this new company, I can only get a claim to stock in this company if I provide value to that company, either putting in labor, providing security, or whatever. And so that's your part of the Bitcoin network. Through mining, you get a claim on a potential block reward because you enhance the security of Forrest's Bitcoin, of Brian's Bitcoin. If you're doing that, you're doing something for me, and I am perfectly satisfied with somebody getting Bitcoin for keeping my Bitcoin secure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's the incentives line up where the more you participate, the more potential you get out of it, and everybody else benefits from your participation. It's not like a zero sum game in that way. The incentives of Bitcoin, in so many ways, I think, are pretty mind blowing. The way everything's designed,
Yeah,
it works pretty well.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
One
go
thing
ahead.
I wanted to add real quick, because I actually got kind of punked on Twitter yesterday by I think his name's @StackSats. So shout out to @StackSats on Twitter. We were talking about how Doge is auditing Fort Knox and all these things, and I actually made I was trying to make an amicable point towards the gold bugs, and I was actually wrong in it. I had said that, hey guys, Bitcoiners have always said that in order to fully audit gold, we would need to melt the gold down to ensure its purity. And I said, actually, no, that's not true. What you would need to do is weigh the gold and measure the dimensions, because we know how much, an ounce of gold, is how big it's supposed to be and how much it's supposed to weigh. And he proved me wrong. And he actually showed me where metals like tungsten actually have a very similar density to gold. So you could dilute a bar of gold with 50% on the inside tungsten. So going back to our talk about auditing gold and the reliability of gold, gold is not very easily provable. And so if you're to have a digital representation of gold, even if you were to audit the physical inventory of gold, it would take insane amounts of work to do so, and you'd constantly have to be melting down gold bars. I'd always made the assumption that you could just weigh it and measure it, and that was actually false. So that's, again, the Bitcoin social layer kind of coming to the rescue, edifying one another when we have these false assumptions. But even in the sense of gold, if you were to physically put in that labor, it would be very difficult to even audit the physical inventory of gold. We do not have that problem with Bitcoin. The inventory of Bitcoin is so easily and cost efficiently measured that any individual can do it at any time.
Yeah, it would be very expensive as well to audit that gold, right? Melting it down. There's a big energy cost in that, and it's not producing more gold. It's not adding to the stock. It's just a verification process. So okay, so let's talk a little bit more about that. So you can audit Bitcoin. How does that compare to, auditing gold? Is complicated, technical, like you said, weighing isn't 100% accurate. You can do sort of chemical analysis, but you probably have to drill a core, and then you're not sure if maybe you just missed the spot that's tungsten and lead, right? So there's a little uncertainty there. How would somebody comparatively audit Bitcoin?
The beautiful thing about the Bitcoin Block Explorer is that anybody can go to it at any time, and you can audit every block that comes out. So you can see the mempool, you can see all the transactions that are awaiting to be entered into the blockchain. You can then, after the block, you can see what has been put in that block. So how many Bitcoin have been sent where. You can run your own software, which would be fairly easy to program in a day and age with tools like ChatGPT. You can run all sorts of very kind of low-hanging software analysis to see where the flows of Bitcoin are going, or from a block, where are Bitcoin going? Is it being are, is the entire block reward going to one place and then being held there? Then okay, then we probably have a miner that's holding on to these assets. Is it being mined and then spent right away, or is it being sent to an exchange? We have a pretty easy analysis of everything that's happening because it's all transparent. And now somebody coming in from the outside say, well, why would I want everybody to know where my money is going? Well, we still have some obscurity. We don't know whose wallet that is in particular. Like with exchanges, we might know that, okay, that's probably a common exchange. But there's the perfect blend of obscurity of personal identity, but then also tags to know, okay, well, at least we can account for these Bitcoin being somewhere. And I think that this is why sovereign wealth funds or strategic national reserves are just 100% going to happen at some point. I know people are worried about whether it's going to happen in the short term. I get it, because there's all sorts of political things that might cause something to not happen in the next 6 months or a year. But why would a nation opt for this? It's because if the people have an actual voice in the governance of their nation, everybody will want to be able to audit their government's treasury at any given time. We don't know what's in Fort Knox, and we have no way of knowing unless we get some crazy Yahoo cowboys in there that might go and audit it, and hopefully that happens. But it's a 1,000,000 times better system for any citizen of the country at any time to be able to just log into a website and see, okay, well, we know that this is the US government's Bitcoin holdings. Okay, they still have 1 million Bitcoin in there. Oh, wait, actually, they moved $100 million worth of Bitcoin out of there. What's going on with that? If we truly live in representative democracies, then this is going to be inherent to a representative democracy. It is going to be a necessary component of that type of governance. And so I believe that more so than like using Bitcoin to pay off the national debt, or using Bitcoin as a way for countries to, compete with one another in game theory and all that stuff. I think all those theories are good and true and will probably play out. But the thing that is absolutely critical to the type of governance that we believe that we have will be a type of money that anybody can audit at any time.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I mean, we've talked a lot about maybe some of the downfalls of gold, but even looking back at when Germany wanted their gold back from the U.S., the U.S. gave them different bars of gold back. So that gold probably got moved around, and they maybe had to get some back. And I'm not alone with the idea of possibly the gold shortages in London is maybe the US trying to acquire some gold before an audit maybe happens. I mean, who knows? Maybe they have the gold spray paint and some bricks out there they're just spraying. I mean, there's a lot of great memes out there right now because we just have no idea what is in Fort Knox. We have no idea really what's in the treasury. Like, they can say they have this and that, but again, how do we audit it as citizens of our nations, right? It's just and Bitcoin was born out of the massive bailouts that happened, the lack of accountability of taxpayer money and money in general by people who controlled it. So it's kind of, it's giving that ability back to the individuals, which I think is super powerful. People can, like you say, audit it. They can hold it. They can own Bitcoin or the private keys to move it to and fro. And incredibly, it's a lot more powerful than people look at or realize when they first get into Bitcoin. They just say, "Oh, wow, this asset is going to go up in value. Sweet, I'll buy some. I'll hold it. See what happens." When you start looking into it, you're like, "Oh, this actually solves like a massive problem, which is money."
Yeah.
So it's
And
pretty
like,
awesome.
and solves I mean, like travesty in the world. Like when people are stolen
Mhm.
from, it's not just like, oh, that's a bummer. It's like, no, people go hungry. People starve. Families break apart because of money problems. Kids have like dysfunction. I mean, like so many things in society go wrong when you have broken money. So it's not just like a banal thing that's happening. It's like, no, we're literally transform. I mean, Bitcoin is literally transforming people's lives and making it better if we can go to that type of a standard. And I think what we've learned in the last couple of weeks too, with Doge and these guys looking into things like the social security, U.S. Social Security, is that there's no, and I'm purely referencing this because you're talking about the gold spray paint memes. That sounds like a meme, but I also think it would have sounded like a meme if a month ago you said, "Oh, we're going to find people on social security that are 230 years old still receiving payments." There's
Yeah.
no depth of absurdity that we can't claim about our government. I mean, it literally, all of us who have been kind of sounding the alarm on government corruption for years, I think we were always tempering what we were saying about the absurdity of government corruption because it could only be so absurd. No, I would have never assumed that you would have 3.5 million 150-year-olds receiving Social Security in the United States. So yes, are all of the gold bars at the bottom of the stack at Fort Knox, are they all just random metals with gold spray paint? It is actually a possibility. And that is really, really kind of crazy.
Yeah, no, you're right. Nothing is too extreme, it seems, unfortunately. Yeah, so yeah. I wanted to share a tweet that you made here. This is let's see here. Here we go. This is a tweet you posted on February 11th. So not that long ago. You said Bitcoin isn't scarce because it's infinitely divisible. Prove me wrong. I'm curious what you mean by that. It isn't scarce because it's infinitely uh, divisible. What does that mean?
So every once in a while, I'll throw out a tweet just to kind of help Bitcoin. So the whole reason I wrote, which side is it on, Bitcoin evangelism, it's like there's a million Bitcoin books out there, and all of them help help explain Bitcoin. Bitcoin evangelism was literally, I wrote it so that Bitcoiners who already understand Bitcoin could better articulate the tenets of Bitcoin to their no coin friends or to their crypto friends. And so every once in a while I'll throw out a tweet like that. And it's really hogwash. I don't believe that because Bitcoin's infinitely divisible that's a problem. But this is one of the common comebacks that we'll get from somebody. And I mean, it's out there on Twitter. You'll see very otherwise intelligent people saying things like this. Like, how can
Right.
Bitcoiners talk about scarcity when there's 100 or 21 quadrillion Satoshi or whatever, and even you could even make it more divisible than that. And so it really comes down to the absurdity of that proposition. It sounds, and I love this term, midwittery. I don't know who created it, but midwittery is this idea that somebody is coming to you with what sounds like a really, really sophisticated answer or question or got you. And it is vapid. It is hollow. It has nothing to it. And so again, everybody in the comments there was very quick to correct. And I think it was great that the Bitcoiners did so. And they all said, are we rehashing the Bitcoin pizza analogy? Just the fact that, I have one pizza and I slice it into 100,000 slices. And so I feed 100,000 people, right? Like it's axiomatic that we understand scarcity doesn't feed, more slices of pizza doesn't feed more people. But for some reason, no coiners actually get caught up on this, the divisibility of Bitcoin. I think what it is, though, is because it's kind of blowing their mind how divisible it is. I don't want to I feel like we're bashing gold bugs today, but gold bugs, because gold is only so divisible, right? It's hard to really get gold down. I mean, I know you can make gold dust and stuff like that, but nobody uses like a little bag of gold shavings for money. You go to like 1/10 of an ounce of gold, and that's about as small as you get. And that's actually still quite a bit of money. It has quite a bit of monetary value. You're not taking that in and buying a taco with 1/10 of an ounce of gold. And so I think gold bugs really get hung up on this idea that okay, scarcity, some divisibility is okay, but being super, super divisible, whoa, there's going to be way too many pieces out there. And then it's going to make it completely worthless. You're going to dilute the supply. They don't understand that divisibility is not the same thing as multiplication. And that's what it comes down to. I don't know. What do you say when somebody says the Bitcoin is infinitely divisible, so it's not scarce?
Yeah, I mean the pizza analogy is a great one, and it's a unit bias. People don't understand that a Satoshi is fundamentally different than a Bitcoin, right? If you're trying to transact on the base layer on chain, your Satoshis are not going to get you very far if you don't have many of them, because of the fees associated with it. So fundamentally, they're different, and they all add up to the Bitcoins or that exist, right? The 21 million out there. And divisibility, I think it's important to have that, because as you said, with gold, you couldn't buy a cup of coffee with gold, but using a layer 2 on Bitcoin, you could buy a cup of coffee. I mean, you could buy a cup of coffee on chain if the fees are low enough, but with the Lightning Network, you could buy a cup of coffee because of that divisibility down to 100 millionth of a Bitcoin. So it's part of what makes it good money, right? That's part of what makes it powerful is the ability to have it divisible. I guess that's probably what I would say to somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. That's great.
I think it's a good conversation though. Yeah, I mean, you're baiting people in to prove you wrong, right? So no, I like that. That's good. I have another one here that I want to bring up. I'm just going to grab it. This one I thought was quite interesting, and I want to see how you got to this concept of, in terms of scarcity, owning 1.1 Bitcoin is like owning 171 acres of land. What does that mean, and how did you get there to that calculation?
Yeah, I had written a similar tweet a few months before where it was 1 Bitcoin is the equivalent of, it was, I think, 1,714 acres of land. So 10 times more.
Right.
And I realized that, 1 Bitcoin is just not a reality for a lot of people. So somebody had retweeted it more recently, I think earlier that day. And I was like, what? I need to update this tweet. And so, yes, I think it is actually more powerful to look at 0.1 Bitcoin or 10 million Satoshis. 10 million Satoshis, 0.1 Bitcoin is like 171 acres of land. Now, I live in Southern California. I have a, by the grace of God, I have a pretty nice house, but it is like 1/8 of an acre. It's like so small. Like, my property is so small and it's so expensive here. And so for me to think about 171 acres of land, that's like pretty mind blowing. It really shows, holy cow, my call option on the Bitcoin network is actually pretty substantial. And so the way that I got to that math, going back to the 1 Bitcoin analogy, was I simply Googled, and then I also asked ChatGPT just to verify the number. But I asked how many acres of land are there in the world, and then I just divided it by 21 million. It wasn't meant to be super precise. I mean, there might be some margin for error, but it's just to give plebs this idea that we have kind of a comprehension of land and we can visualize it. But for some reason, we have a hard time visualizing what our share of 21 million looks like. And when we understand what our share of the network is, I think it then reinforces this idea that in the fiat economy, if you were to do that same thing, it's like, well, even if you had 171 acres of land in, say, of fiat money, and that was how much relative you had to the total supply of fiat, that would actually be getting diluted every single day. So my 171 acres in Bitcoin, it stays 171 acres forever, either unless I increase it or it decreases because I decrease it. In the fiat realm, my 171 acres will actually become 160 acres, and then 140 acres, and then 101, 101 acres, and it keeps getting. So to me, it gives a visual representation to this idea of either being a fixed part of the network, or a fixed call on the total outstanding supply of the network, or getting diluted by that network. And so by making it 0.1 Bitcoin, I think it just brings it down for most plebs to be able to wrap their heads around it, whether they already have 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 Bitcoin, and they can, extrapolate for themselves, or if they're trying to get to 10 million sats, or they're trying to get to 0.1 Bitcoin, it's like, yeah, if I can get to that level, that's something significant. And passing down 171 acres of land to your grandchildren someday, that's a pretty significant thing. I'm a Bible believing man, and the Bible pretty consistently talks about, in the wisdom literature, that a man who leaves something for his children is a righteous man. Now, it doesn't mean that you're unrighteous if you don't do that, but it's just a righteous act to be able to pass something along to the next generation. And so if we can do that, and we have this information in front of us and we have an ability to get to that, I think a lot of people can work to 0.1 Bitcoin right now. It is a good thing that you're doing. It is worth your time. It is valuable and it means something to the future.
Yeah, it's a really interesting comparison because people understand the relative scarcity of land. I mean, we might lose some shorefront to the ocean or to the tectonic plates, and maybe they're building some islands in whoever knows, dumping some sand and all this, but it stays relatively similar probably over time. And again, it kind of comes back to that idea of absolute scarcity with Bitcoin, and you compared it again to fiat, where that fiat terms, the amount of land, if you held that point 0.1 Bitcoin in however much, what would that be? Around 10,000 US. If you held it in dollars instead, that amount of land would go down over time. Um, yeah. So, and that amount of, if the land didn't change, if it was absolutely scarce, that would stay constant.
Mhm.
And it's about as close as we can get to absolute scarcity until something like Bitcoin has been created, which is true absolute scarcity
Right.
with the 21 million cap. It's a genius comparison, and it's also tangible because people can say like, I mean, there's crypto people out there that really have a nominal bias. They see whatever coin is $3. Oh, I can get a whole coin there, but I can't buy one Bitcoin. I can't, whatever, 0.1 Bitcoin. That seems like so little. But then you compare it to, well, that's equivalent to whatever 100 or 1,700 acres. And
Mhm.
people would say, wow, that's a huge amount of land,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? They understand that. So it's a great comparison. I really like that one
Yeah. And
quite
that's
a
one of
lot.
the things that I advocate for a lot is just speaking in sats to people. And
Right.
the easiest way, I mean, as a guy who wrote a book that's trying to get you to help you orange pill people, if you want to just skip reading my book and you want to orange pill somebody, the easiest way to do it, get them to download a free Lightning wallet, custodian or not. I don't care about that. Send them 1,000 sats. Sending somebody 1,000 of something, it shows them, it like appeals to the unit bias that you're talking about. It wins that high ground in the crypto debate. And the other thing that might even be a bigger deal is there's this idea of it like being this us versus them type of thing. Oh, the Bitcoiners are this closed club, or they're like CrossFitters where they just won't stop talking about it. They're Bitcoiners are like vegans. They just always talk about, their diet, that's all we talk about. But now it's like, well, now we're not different. You're actually a Bitcoiner too, and I just invited you into the club, and I get, so we appealed to the unit bias, and then we took away that us versus them barrier. I mean, if every Bitcoiner went around and said, you know what, I'm going to budget 5,000 sats, and I'm going to go around and send people 500 sats a piece or 1,000 sats a piece. If every Bitcoiner orange pilled 5 people, that you would make Bitcoiners. It would literally be a rinse and repeat process that you could do as much as you want. But we would 5x the Bitcoin network overnight if we did that.
Yeah, I agree completely. I love that idea. And this kind of goes into this next tweet here of yours that just says spend Bitcoin. I love that. There's kind of this rule that some people in the space go by which is, never sell your Bitcoin. I kind of differentiate selling and spending. But I also think that you shouldn't never sell your Bitcoin. I think if you want to upgrade your life in some way or something like that, right? And the only way to do that is through fiat, then that's that, right? So, but yeah, maybe yeah, can you elaborate on this? Like there's the idea of sending some sats to people, but what's the benefit in spending Bitcoin?
Yeah. So it sounds like I just keep talking my bag, but I'm passionate enough about these things to write a book. So the second book here, the white one, is called Parallel, and it's essentially the case for the parallel economy.
Mhm.
The biggest pushback I've ever gotten in Bitcoin, aside from being kind of friendly to crypto people, because I believe crypto people are low hanging fruit that we can orange pill, and so I try to be gentle with them and be like, hey, just kind of welcome to the team. So I get some pushback on that, but the advocacy of spending your Bitcoin, because yes, I think the first thing is people confuse selling with spending. So I'm specifically talking about spending sats, or even buying more, using more fiat to buy a little bit extra sats so that you have your spending sats. So that takes care of it, should take care of it right there. But when it comes down to it, I get so much pushback because guys say, no, under no circumstances will I ever spend my Bitcoin. I'll say, well, just spend it. Like, that's different. They say, well, that's the same thing. I'm like, okay, well, it's not. Now look at it this way. In the fiat economy, you have expenses every month and you have income every month. Well, if you're a valuable member of the fiat economy and you're good at budgeting, you accrue more fiat at the end of the month than you spend. Why on earth do you not assume the same thing about participating in the Bitcoin economy that way? If you participate in the Bitcoin economy, and I can tell you this from firsthand experience, you'll actually accrue more Bitcoin by participating in that economy if you're providing more value to the economy than you're taking from it. That's a basic market dynamic. So yes, do you want to stack more sats? Well, guess what? Start participating in the Bitcoin economy. Whatever you do in the fiat economy, somebody in Bitcoin will pay you to do the same thing. And as soon as we do that, then we create more places for people to spend their Bitcoin. And then because this is one of the things that a valid concern from people is, well, if I spend my Bitcoin at a business, then they're just going to sell it to pay for their toilet paper and their supplies and their soap and their payroll and all these different things. And I understand that. But as we continue to make more pockets where people now, if all of a sudden I have a chain of wellness studios, if my supplier, if the people I buy all my supplies from, if I can orange pill them and get them to buy and, or not buy and hold, but accept Bitcoin and hold Bitcoin, well, then I can spend my Bitcoin. It stays in Bitcoin, and then whoever they pay their expenses. So yes, there is some building that needs to happen to that network, but it happens through these peer-to-peer connections. And guess what? We've seen that all along the way. With Orange Pill app, we have a whole section where you can find like local merchants that accept Bitcoin. So of course that economy isn't crazy robust right now, but it's a lot more robust than it was a year ago. And it's a hell of a lot more robust than it was 10 years ago. And so it's building towards that. And it comes back to, if you provide value to the economy, you will gain more sats through that participation than you spend. That's just how markets work.
Yeah, and there was some technical barriers at points, maybe making this more difficult. A lot of those have been solved or are being worked on, and yeah, to get into the Orange Pill app, like I think I've heard this talked about before, but it's a social layer of
Mhm.
Bitcoin. It helps facilitate, like you said, merchants that accept Bitcoin, people that have Bitcoin can talk to other Bitcoiners. There's even like the opportunity for peer-to-peer exchanges. If you wanted to acquire more Bitcoin, maybe you could buy that directly from somebody, and that's an on-chain transaction as opposed to buying from an exchange. And then like you're supporting maybe the network more. What are some of the benefits to get involved with other Bitcoiners that maybe you've seen with the Orange Pill app being involved with them?
Mhm.
I should say, I think you're the chief marketer. Is that correct?
Yep,
Yeah.
correct. Or
Yeah.
chief propagandist. They won't grant me that title, but that's what I keep going for. But no, I think it's essentially this. The Bitcoin social layer isn't just the Orange Pill app. We're one part of the Bitcoin social layer. The Bitcoin social layer is this right now. Bitcoiners talking. It's Bitcoin Twitter or Bitcoin X. It's Bitcoin Noster. It's those, and all of that is digital. That's in the internet, and the internet is a incredibly valuable tool. It's incredibly valuable. Bitcoin wouldn't be where it is today without the internet. But one of the missing components is the in real life side of Bitcoin. Very few Bitcoiners have met or hung out with or gone to a local meetup or gotten coffee with another Bitcoiner or have any kind of in real life connection with the Bitcoin community. And that's pure and simple. That's what Orange Pill app is here to provide. We're the biggest repository of Bitcoin only events. So that's a
Mm.
huge problem. If you go to meetup.com, you're going to find a lot of events that are called Bitcoin events, but they're Web3 and they're crypto. And you're going to find all sorts of, you're going to sit through an hour and a half presentation on some new Web3 app that's going to do X, Y, and Z. And you're going to feel like you wasted your time. So the events in Orange Pill app are Bitcoin only events, and they're local meetups. I mean, there's one that's down the street from me. It's probably 15 minutes away. They meet at a brewery every Thursday. I didn't know that was there until I saw it in Orange Pill app. There's guys constantly reaching out just to go grab lunch or grab coffee. And so I've met with a few dozen Bitcoiners in my local area that I didn't know existed. I literally, because there wasn't a tool to connect that. X doesn't do a good job of connecting you with local people. It connects you and I, it connects all sorts of people, and that's great. That plays that component. But if all we have as the Bitcoin social layer is online connection, online is just there's a bit of a disconnection. There's in dark times, there's a single point of censorship that where they can pretty quickly turn off our communications. Obviously, that's not the case with Nostr, but that's the case with other apps. In real life connections are the most censorship resistant or censorship proof type of connection you could possibly have. So if we want to make, sorry, got the cough today. If we want to make Bitcoin more anti-fragile as a network, if we're missing the in-person connection, we're missing a really big part of our resiliency as a parallel system, as a parallel economy, as a social layer. So what we believe what we're doing is really, really important. And again, it's not only connecting plebs that want to be friends. So if you want other Bitcoiner friends, that's great. But the Bitcoin merchants thing, I think, is a huge component. So yeah, a lot of people go and they can find, like I bought my cold wallet with Bitcoin, and I bought different merchandise with Bitcoin, and that's easy to do online. But a lot of people haven't spent their Bitcoin in person, right? At a merchant, at a vendor or something like that. And Orange Pill app makes that process a little bit easier to do. I've gone to some meetups as well where I've seen, I don't know how much this is like putting out there, but, at meetups is where you can kind of exchange some fiat for Bitcoin, and you see that kind of stuff happening. So that component of wild sats being exchanged and KYC Bitcoin, that's not something that has to do with Orange Pill app, but when people are in person, it gives them more freedom and opportunity to interact with their money the way that they deem fit. And so, yeah, I think that the work that we're doing at Orange Pill app, the work that's happening on Nostr, the Bitcoiners that are getting involved in Bitcoin X, we're all furthering the mission of Bitcoin. And if we connect more Bitcoiners, then that just makes us one step closer to Hyperbitcoinization.
Yeah, yeah, and I love the Orange Pill app. I use it all the time. Actually, I just created an event on it today, this morning. Next week, next Tuesday, there's at the local coffee shop down the road. There's going to be a meetup, Bitcoin and coffee, and it's got this cool feature as well, which it's based on location, so it kind of approximates, and you can find Bitcoiners and just chat and connect with them, and they're you might. I mean, how else are you going to find them? Like, uh, it's very difficult to find local Bitcoiners on something like Twitter because there's just it's so global, right? So to narrow down and find people around you is very difficult. And yeah, there's really something to be said about the in-person meeting of Bitcoiners. A lot of us have a lot of things in common. I mean, we've gone down like the sound money road most likely, and interested in sovereignty as an individual and all sorts of interesting stuff. So I've had some fantastic in-person meets because of the Orange Pill app, and yeah, just from like running meetups and going to meetups and all sorts of stuff. I think it's incredibly underrated and very valuable in my opinion.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And it's growing, and I think it's one of those things. It's a difficult thing to start as a social network from zero, because there's essentially no value when we start on day one. It's just the people that believe in this idea. And so I was one of the early members. I actually didn't initially work for Orange Pill app. I just signed up as a member, and I believe in it, and I started promoting it, and that led into me kind of getting incorporated into the team. But yeah, it went from a network effect of 0 to we have a network effect of over 14,000 Bitcoiners who have signed up and have gotten a membership, which is like a level of commitment. You're committing to this community, and that has this amazing spam filter. Like the fact that you don't get crypto, questions and scams and like, hey, what's your crypto trading like right now from some beautiful Asian woman? It's like, if you want that, then Twitter's your thing. But you don't get that. It's very high signal. It's that filtration process to know that it's not a Web3 question. It's not a Web3 meetup. It's not a Web3 vendor. It's just all of that's taken out of it. And I think we're pushing the progress of Bitcoin forward by doing that. And we even we're constantly trying to make innovations to the app to make the experience more seamless. We just this week launched our own native Lightning wallet within the app. So when you go to merchants, and this is actually a huge pain point for me. Like I said, I have a chain of wellness studios. We accept Bitcoin. Unfortunately, it was always kind of clunky to it. Uh, our Lightning payments didn't integrate with our point of sale software. And so somebody would come in and they would try to spend Bitcoin, but then one of my staff members wouldn't know how to do it and all that kind of stuff. So now when somebody goes on Orange Pill app, they can just zap our business directly through the app, through the native wallet. And so any merchant that's on Orange Pill app doesn't have to deal with the headache of a point of sale system that accepts Bitcoin. It's just natively there. And so these little tools are things that are, maybe most people haven't thought about them, but they're the little incremental things that will need to happen for us to go towards a Bitcoin, hyper-Bitcoinization, a Bitcoin standard, those types of things. And that's what's exciting is, yes, with all the talk of sovereign wealth funds and national Bitcoin strategic reserves, all those things are massive. But honestly, I think the parallel economy is an even bigger thing. What happens when all 21 million Bitcoin are in the parallel economy and none of them are for sale on exchange, right? Like that's kind of being a little hyperbolic, but imagine the vast majority of Bitcoin being tied up in this circular economy. What does that do for the price? It makes the price absolutely skyrocket. The value of the Bitcoin, the buying, and let's not even call it the price of your Bitcoin. The buying power of your Bitcoin is going to go up tremendously. Right now, you can buy $1 worth of stuff for 1,000 sats. But what happens when you can buy $1,000 worth of stuff for 1,000 sats because all of the Bitcoin is tied up in this parallel economy? So yes, you stack the strategic reserves and all the pro Bitcoin advocacy on top of that. But the parallel economy, I think, is really, really where this rocket ship goes crazy in terms of you having some substantial buying power and a robust amount of options, of a pretty wide variety of options of where you can spend your Bitcoin. The more that Bitcoin goes up in value, the more that merchants have tools to accept Bitcoin and integrate into that system. It just provides a much more well-rounded economy for the Bitcoiners who want to participate in it. And I think we're right around the corner for some like substantial change in that capacity.
That's interesting. I never thought about the keeping the business digital and just interacting with it digitally, even if you're physically acquiring something.
Mm.
That integration with Lightning is kind of an interesting way to do it. To have the merchant on Orange Pill app and be able to pay them directly through there. That's yeah, because there is some friction. A BTC Pay server integrated with a POS, like it's not an easy thing to do. So, or like a static QR code, then how do you account for it? And
Yep.
it makes it's kind of a good alternative system for merchants to accept Bitcoin. I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, and that component of being able to communicate through. So, obviously we can send a message, or anybody can send a message with their Lightning payment, but having the messaging side of the app so that when somebody sends me a payment, I can then further communicate, not just through the Zap itself, but it's a seamless transition with the Lightning. By clicking the Lightning bolt, I can send the payment. By clicking the chat button, I can send a message, or we can communicate about the services that they want or the plan that they want or whatever. It's a much more well-rounded option to have customer retention, customer follow-up, and those things that were kind of missing before. So the seamless integration of messaging, connectivity, and payments is a huge leap forward, I think, for the parallel economy.
Yeah, I agree. I wanted to just chat a little bit about your books. So are they both about uh, helping people orange pill people, or what are they kind of about?
So Bitcoin evangelism, the orange one behind me,
Yeah.
that is much more, how would you evangelize Bitcoin? So, something like it's meant to give uh easy kind of axiomatic explanations for Bitcoin. I feel like the way I said that sentence actually wasn't very easy. So, okay. So somebody asks, how do I don't understand this idea of trustlessness. Bitcoiners, we do this thing, we spout off, oh yeah, Bitcoin is trustless and this is what makes it so amazing. And we're just, when people listen to us, it's like they're trying to drink from a fire hose. But when we explain something like trustlessness, which is this kind of can be this convoluted concept. Well, it's actually quite simple. The way, I tell people, Bitcoiners, to explain it in the book is like this. It's like when somebody says, I could never trust my money to the algorithm. Well, I would say, you know what? You've actually trusted a lot more than your money to the algorithm. And you actually do it every single day. When was the last time that you drove with your wife and your kids in the back seat and you drove through an intersection and you didn't even think twice about the fact that you just trusted an algorithm? But what you did do with the life of yourself, your wife, and your kids was you trusted in an algorithm that said, I have a green light. And so north and southbound traffic are going to go. And I'm trusting that without even thinking about it, it's trustless because the algorithm just works. East and westbound have a red light. That's far more important than what happens to my money. And yet we do that multiple times every single day. So it's built with all sorts of little analogies, little tidbits, and little explanations like that. Hopefully those little nuggets can make it more simple to orange pill our friends. Parallel, the white book behind me, that one is more for like the seasoned Bitcoiner. Now they're both for, I guess, for Bitcoiners, but for Bitcoiners that are like, yeah, I get Bitcoin. I know how to explain Bitcoin, but what's next for Bitcoin? It's really the advocacy for the parallel system. So it's called parallel for that reason. How do we participate in that? And what's the big picture? And the thesis of that book is essentially this, is that empire always falls. The Roman Empire, the Byzantine version of the empire, the Persian Empire, the Hellenistic Empire, all of just every great civilization, the empire always collapses. The Soviet Union collapses. What happens is a parallel system, 100% of the time, the empire collapses. 100% of the time, a parallel system springs up in its wake. The state has lost all its power. So now people need to scramble and they turn to barter or they turn to metal coins, whatever they have left over. And that parallel system operates for a while because the state is very weak. But after 5, 10, 15 years, the state re-centralizes power, gets reorganized. And then the parallel system is so disorganized, it's decentralized, which is great. But with the centralization, inherently, it is disorganized because there's nobody to tell everybody what to do.
Right.
And so this central power comes back in and reabsorbs the parallel system into the state system. So parallel systems never last beyond half of a generation. Well, why will the Bitcoin parallel system be different this time? The very thing that I said we're not supposed to say. Why will it be different this time? Well, I believe it'll be different this time and for a very specific reason. The Bitcoin parallel economy, the Bitcoin parallel system is the only parallel system in human history that isn't rising as a reaction to the collapse of empire. It is actually being built in advance of the collapse of empire. So we have a 15, 20, 25 year head start before fiat collapses, before the US dollar collapses, before US hegemony collapses. We have this parallel system already being built so that if it ever does need to become the system that everybody goes to, it'll actually have the infrastructure, the scalability. The Lightning Network will be able to process the transactions of the entire world or of an entire country. And so the very thing that made the other parallel systems collapse was their disorganization. Well, Bitcoin actually has this ability to pair decentralization with actually a pretty high degree, which you mentioned earlier, because of incentives, a high degree of organization. And so that's the thesis of the book, and that's how we get there. And it's also the advocacy for that.
That's a great thesis. Incredibly interesting. And yeah, that's how I view Bitcoin as being an off-ramp and an option for people. We didn't really have a sound money option that really worked. Like you said, people would go to maybe Coinage or something like this. But it has its faults where, Bitcoin has improved those and actually like the system works already. It just hasn't gone to scale yet. Because people they just continue to rely on what they're used to. They haven't maybe stepped out, and that the other book you have there, evangelizing Bitcoin. Yeah, orange pilling is incredibly difficult. I've tried to orange pill people, and you get questions you don't have the right answer to, and yeah, it's pretty exhausting as well. So I mean, to have some guide, some help in that way is pretty helpful, I feel like. Well, we're coming up to an hour here, Brian. thank you so much for the conversation. I really enjoyed this. And just if you had anywhere you wanted to direct the viewers, or any final thoughts before we go.
I would I would highly encourage you guys to try Orange Pill app. Just try it out. Do it for a month or two. If you're planning to go to the Bitcoin conference in Las Vegas or do any of those big events, it is an absolute game changer when you go to these events, because if you're Michael
Mm.
Saylor or you're Jeff Booth or whatever, yes, they have the 9 to 5 conference. Then those guys have the after parties and there's all sorts of events. Well, guess what? When you're on Orange Pill app and you show up to a city that has 5,000 Bitcoiners in it, and you have a tool that literally can allow you to message any one of those people, and you can see all the the random pleb meetup that's at the bar down the street or at the coffee shop before the day's events get started, or the beach the pool party that's going to happen or whatever. All of those things for the plebs are in Orange Pill app. And so if you're going to go to an
Cool.
event, it changes the game for how you get to experience it. You get to experience it like Michael Saylor or Jeff Booth, or name X, Y, or Z right there. The guys like me that don't get invited to those types of parties, you still get to have a blast and you still get to meet up with Bitcoiners. And guess what? When you go to these big Bitcoin conferences, you're actually going to get a lot of the Web3. You're going to get a lot of the crypto at the conference itself, but Orange Pill app allows you to filter that portion of it out. And that's probably one of the biggest hiccups. As yes, when you cast a big net, like the Bitcoin conference says, they do a great job. It's a great conference. People have a great time. But I had 2 years ago, I was selling Bitcoin evangelism. I had a booth for it. And it was probably 40% of the people that came up to me that were like crypto guys. They're like, how much are you selling your book for? And it was for like 75,000 sats at the time, because Bitcoin was so low. And they go, what's a sat? And they had just told me that they were like a vice president of a Web3 startup. These weren't just guys that were attending the conference. These were guys that worked in crypto. And when I said sats, they didn't even know what I was talking about. And so yes, if you want to filter out that noise in life, at a conference, then Orange Pill app is the tool to do that.
That's a really cool use case. I hadn't even thought about the, that location based side of it. If you go to a conference, I mean, that's great signal right there for sure. Again, Brian, just want to thank you for your time, and thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Forrest. Appreciate it, man.